So today's episode is recorded in front of a live audience at the European Women Payments Network at the annual conference in Amsterdam at the Mollie Office. Thanks to Mollie for having us, and thanks to European Women in Payment Network for having us. My guest in today's episode, which by the way is episode 75, is Lieke Hölscher, and Lieke is the area lead transaction monitoring detecting at Rabobank. She's responsible for a team of not 100, as I wrote down, but 200 members, and they build out engines, software, I suppose, with a lot of AI that detects money laundering, terrorist financing, fraud, and all kinds of other nefarious things that criminals can do. She was also recently nominated for the Young Talent Award by Topvrouw van het Jaar. And she's also a mother of a boy. As to her origin story, and we'll go deep into that later, she was unhappy with the transaction monitoring system at Rabobank, where she started to work. She figured, I can do this a lot better. So she decided to build a new team, new software, new everything from scratch. So basically, if you think that being an entrepreneur within a big company like Rabobank is not possible, this episode is for you. So in the next 40 minutes or so, we'll discuss how she redesigned the transaction monitoring from scratch. We'll learn how she approached building a new quote-unquote company within Rabobank, the importance of diversity when building software solutions that rely on AI, and we'll also learn who Bram is. In fact, we'll go there straight after my intro. So when you're ready to listen and learn how to be an entrepreneur while working for a big company, please welcome to the stage and to Women Disrupting Tech, Lieke Hölscher. So
thank you.
So welcome, Lieke. Good to have you. Question I always ask at the start is how you got into your current job or current position. Floor is yours.
All right. Yes. Well, for me, that started about 4 years ago when I was in the role of project lead analytics at the central data science department of Rabobank. And in that role, I could pick up any type of analytics project. And I just happened to come across transaction monitoring. And as you just introduced, the purpose of transaction monitoring is to process all the transactions in the bank to detect money laundering and terrorism financing. And the system that we had at that time, the IT system, it was not meeting all the expectations that the business had yet. So that was a trigger for me and also Joris to look into that. And Joris is one of the best data scientists that I ever met. He was the lead data scientist in the central data science department at that time. And together we proposed to build this new solution that you were already talking about. And that started as a side project that we were just doing on top of our real jobs, I would say. But it quickly grew into something much bigger than a full-time job, I would say. For me personally, I started referring to it as my work baby. And yeah, that was also the reason why I transferred then from the central data science department to the transaction monitoring department to continue working with my work baby to build that product and also build the team. And that team that grew from just Joris and me to, as you said, over 100 people. And the weird thing is that was only the start, because that was our solution for Dutch customers, so processing Dutch transactions. And well, I had a larger ambition. I wanted to go global. So yeah, I wanted to take that global scope, but that was also the scope of my manager at that time. My manager was Jos Boer. And I think I was incredibly lucky to have him as a manager because, well, for many different reasons, actually. But yeah, what happened is we worked really, really well, both personally and professionally. We were really open to each other. I told him already on day one I wanted his job, and he was okay with that. And he also helped me. So when the moment came when we saw an opportunity to roll out my work baby then globally, then he actually stepped aside to give me the opportunity to take over his scope. So, well, if that isn't inspirational leadership, then I don't know what is. So yeah, that's also how I get into my current role as head of transaction monitoring detection at Rabobank.
Okay, so why transaction monitoring? Why did you pick that topic?
Well, I didn't pick it myself. I just happened to come across it.
Okay.
It was actually my manager at that time.
What piqued your interest?
Well, it was my manager at that time who pointed me in the direction of transaction monitoring, just because he saw something, well, we can help there, right? We were the analytics department, and he saw, okay, here they have some, well, problems. They're not meeting the business expectations. Maybe you can do something here. And when looking into it, then, yeah, I thought, I can do this.
Okay, cool. Why?
Why did I think I could do it?
Yeah, why you?
Well, I think it was a combination of knowing the content really well. I had a lot of experience with building AI solutions and also telling the story about it. And yeah, so I thought with that background, I knew what the solution needed to look like. And I also knew that I was able to build such solutions.
Okay, cool. I want to go back in time a bit. Who's Bram?
Yeah, I can smile about that now, but I definitely couldn't back then. Neither could my parents, because Bram is the person that I desperately wanted to be when I was 10 years old. And he wasn't the only one. I made up many different characters because I was just so convinced that I needed to be a boy. And that was because, well, all my heroes were boys. I wanted to be Zorro or a knight, like Theory from one of my favorite books, The Letter of for the King. Do you know it? Great book. But anyway, I really wanted to be fast and strong, and I wanted to do sword fighting as a sport. But for me, there were two problems to do that. One is that I realized physically I was never going to be a match for most boys. And that was so frustrating for me, and it felt so unfair. But at the same time, it was not something that anybody could change. It's just a fact. Boys are physically different. But I think there are many things that we can change. For example, the way that we appreciate the same type of characteristics just as much in women as we do in men. And that brings me to my second problem. My second problem is that I have a lot of characteristics that are more common in men. And I call that my fighter side. Because in a man, it is appreciated if he is really strong, both physically and also in his communication style. While in women, we mostly expect them to be kind. And for me, that was a problem because most of my characteristics fit much better with the expectations that we have of men. And for example, I really enjoy having an intense discussion and using that to make a connection. I also really like having to fight for something that really energizes and motivates me. And it feels very natural to me to make bold statements about what I want, who I am, what I stand for. And at that time, it felt that those characteristics were only appreciated in men.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know how to be proud of those characteristics without actually being a man.
Okay, has that changed?
It has changed, yes. I think a lot has changed. The world is already changing. What I, for example, see is that there are right now already so many more female role models than there were 20 years ago. My son just turned 2 this weekend. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And he has already more books with female characters in the lead than I ever had. And I think that's super important because it's not just about women seeing themselves doing anything. It's also about men seeing them that way, seeing us that way.
Yeah, just to circle back to the previous panel, I think it's for male investors to have female role models to see that it's actually possible. Yes, they can make it successful is like incredibly important. But that as a side note. How did you change your view on being a woman from when you were 10 years old to now?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of several realizations. When I was younger, I think it was a combination of three things. The first one is that part of my problem was kind of automatically solved because I got older and my dreams shifted from wanting to be Zorro to wanting to be a CEO of a large company. And that meant that also my attention shifted from wanting to be the strongest person in the room to wanting to be the smartest person in the room. And I didn't see any physical limitations in that because, well, the fastest girl in the school would still be beaten by half the boys, but the smartest girl in the school could easily be the smartest person in the school. And that's also what I really wanted to be. I wanted to be the smartest person in the school. I definitely wasn't, for the record. But that was not the point. The point is that I thought I could be, and that was really motivating for me. So that was point one. Then point two is that I found reasons to want to be a girl. And yeah, I think that started with me getting breasts. It's just, it made me realize that got me attention, and attention in a good way. To be honest, I just kind of like that. So I discovered there was more to me than those characteristics that made me identify with men. And I think deep down, I realized that pretty early on because I never really wanted to be a boy, I think, because for example, I didn't cut my hair, which would have been relatively definitive. I wore a wig instead, which I could take off anytime. And I also did that at home. I didn't wear the wig. So I think that was also a sign that, well, deep down, I didn't really want to be a boy.
How did your parents support you on the journey?
Yeah, it was really hard for them as well because, yeah, of course, it's a topic, right? There could also be very good reasons why I seriously would have wanted to be a boy. So for them, it was also very difficult. And they also got a lot of questions about it, of course, from people around them. But I think deep down, they also realized I didn't really want to be a boy. For me, it was just a cry for help. I just desperately wanted other people to see me the way that I saw me. And I just didn't know how to do that without making them look like me as a boy.
Okay. So when we spoke before, you told me that there was also a teacher that changed the whole perspective.
Yeah, that was the third point. The third point is that I realized that being an exception can also be a good thing. That was indeed the teacher who was, for me, the trigger, was the first male teacher in our school. And I noticed that everybody wanted to be in his class, not necessarily because he was the best teacher, but because he was different, and that was interesting. So I thought, well, if he can be a man in a women's world, then I can be a woman in a man's world, right?
Yeah.
So that was also really motivating for me.
So there's the teacher, the parents, your own growing up. So has that also changed your perspective on role models?
No, it's an interesting question. Well, I think it's really important, as I said before, that all of us start to appreciate the same kind of characteristics in anybody. And I think what would help to create that is if we just have a diverse set of role models in everything.
Okay.
And what I also realized much more recently is that those characteristics that make me identify with men are not the characteristics that make me a good leader today. They really help me to operate in a man's world, but I would say it's my empathy that makes me a good leader. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that men aren't good leaders or that men can't lead with empathy. Or what I'm trying to say is, I think every single person has a combination of qualities, and that's different for everybody, but that combination of qualities can make you a good leader. And I know that for me personally, it's not my fighter side.
No.
And I think that's something in general that the world would benefit from if we would have more leaders who aren't necessarily fighters, but who are connectors in the first place. And I think there are many great leaders out there who are not getting a chance at the moment because, well, this being able to operate in a man's world is still a requirement.
Yeah.
And I really hope that we can change.
Do you see that changing though?
I see that changing. Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Can you give some examples?
Well, I think it's happening right now. For example, I was nominated for this award, and then I got a lot of attention within Rabobank also for this. And they really helped me to stress the point that it's really about our culture. And I think that also measuring different types of qualities than we did before really helps. And this was already a natural thing to do. I didn't have to fight for it. I think if you ask women who are a bit older, they would have had to fight for it more than we have to do today.
Okay, so you see a shift, let's say, in acceptance?
I would say in the qualities that are appreciated in people, it becomes broader.
Yeah, more diverse.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to shift gears a bit. You already said then when you saw the software at Rabo, they cried out for help, and you saw, they have a problem. How did you sell building something new instead to your management? How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think that it holds for everybody that if you want to sell something, then it really helps if you really believe in it yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it starts by making sure that you really believe it.
So conviction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, the first step was to really dive into the world of transaction monitoring because, well, I knew the technology really well that I wanted to propose. I knew its potential, but, well, I didn't know the transaction monitoring world that well. So first, I really dove into that and made sure I really understood everything about it, from the processes to the system. And when we did that, we developed a proof of concept. And I say we, but actually, I never wrote a single line of code. That was all Joris. So all credits to Joris. But I did understand what he built and also why what he built was already proving that we should invest in this technology more. And yeah, I also worked at McKinsey before as a consultant. And there I also really learned to tell a story in the right way towards senior management. So that was also something that I could use.
Okay, so there's conviction, there's domain knowledge, and there's storytelling.
Yeah.
That's
a good summary.
Yeah, that's okay. Incidentally, just as a break, I was in Silicon Valley last week, and the interesting part of what you're saying is that when we talked about having a good pitch with people like VCs, they were naming exactly these three things.
Really? Oh.
So as a subtitling for you here in the audience and those listening, this is how you can build it. And I am pretty convinced that every woman can tell a good story. I'm pretty convinced that every woman can have conviction and can have domain expertise. So this is your secret recipe. Not so secret anymore. Okay, so you sold it to Rabobank, to your managers. How high in the hierarchy did you have to go for this?
Yeah, it went up to board level twice.
Yeah, twice.
Yeah, it was an interesting process. Do you want me to go through the full? Okay, all right. It started with my manager at that time in the Central Data Science Department, Cyprian was his name. And he was the one pointing us into the direction of transaction monitoring in the first place. So he was easy. He was,
he knew he had a problem.
He was on board from the start. He was actually, helping us a lot, making sure that we got an audience at the right tables. And the next step was Jos, whom I already mentioned before.
The guy whose position you wanted to take.
Exactly. And I remember the first time I spoke to Jos, And because we were, of course, talking about this solution, I was trying to convince him already. And he said, yeah, but if we're going to do something like this, then I need a jack of all trades. And I said, that's me. And I'm still not sure if he believed me at the time, but I do know that as soon as he took the plunge, he has supported me and the solution every step of the way. So he was a great person to have in our corner along the way. And
good sponsor.
yes, a sponsor, yes, definitely. And also Ciprian and Jos, they helped to bring the story to their managers. So we pitched the idea there as well. And then they had to bring it to board level.
Okay.
And for that, we also needed an assessment of an independent consultant. And yeah, that all worked out. So we got the approval to do the migration. I was really happy at that time. But now looking back, I know that was only an intermediate step. So that was the first board approval. But we needed a second one because 2 years later, when we already completed the migration for the Dutch customers, we made that within committed timelines, by the way. Very proud of that.
Yeah, that's also somehow something that female project leads always make sure they get done. They get it within budget and within time.
Yes, I think that's super important. Say what you do what you say.
Yeah, I think so too. But somehow for men, it's sort of more appreciated if you go double the budget with 75% or less of the benefits.
Yeah, as long as you shout loud enough, and it seems to be okay sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that is something that I'm also still learning how that works because, well, I have my own style. I believe in this way, but I do see that there are other ways that also
Is that also about accountability? That women feel more, I hate to stereotype, but that women have an easier time feeling accountable for the end result and for doing something as they committed to?
Yeah, I can imagine that could be the case. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Sorry,
got the second approval?
Yes. Well.
Or you were about to get the second approval?
Yeah. Do you want to know more about the second approval? Yeah, I just want to finish that part of the story because, what happened is there were some changes at Rabobank, which also resulted into organizational changes. So that also resulted into new senior management. And well, understandably, they wanted reassurance that the new solution that we just built was also the right strategic solution going forward.
Yeah.
So then we had to undergo another assessment of another independent consultant. And well, that was also the moment when I was able to take over. And I was really happy that I could, because that really felt like the moment of truth for me. And it was much harder than the first time, because this time I knew that the outcome had so many consequences for so many people that I already really, really cared about. But luckily, we also had a huge advantage because we'd already proven that we could do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what made the difference in the end, that we could prove that we've already had our success.
And also, I think Rabo, the Dutch market, is by far the largest market for
Rabobank.
For Rabo. So if you can make it here, you can make it everywhere.
Well, there are some complications, but that's definitely an argument I try to make. Yes.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you've built a team of 200. The first 100, I think, you built yourself.
Yeah.
That was a timeline-wise. Was that in between those two approvals, or did it only get started to really grow after the second approval?
No. The first 100 happened before the second approval.
Okay. Yeah. And then because since then you've grown it, you doubled the size.
Yeah.
What happened then?
Well, that was mostly because I took over the scope and there was already a team.
They were onboarded onto your team.
Exactly. Okay. But we still continue to grow after that.
Yeah.
So that's also part.
How is it to lead a 200 people team?
Sometimes, to be honest, a bit lonely. because I grew with the team, so I really feel part of the team still.
Yeah.
And you also realize that you build a lot of connections, and I still feel really close to a lot of the people in the teams.
Mhm.
And with a lot of people, I have that connection already from the beginning. So they also grew with me, and they just see me as me. But
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the case, but sometimes I feel like, oh, for people who are new, just coming in, it's a bit different.
Yeah.
To start building that connection. And yeah, maybe I'm completely wrong here. Nobody feels that threshold, but I'm just very afraid that people do. And that
Okay.
sometimes,
Why are you afraid of that?
I think because I desperately want to belong. Maybe that's
Yeah.
also a female thing, that you want to be part of the group. Or maybe not. It could also be
I think
personal
sense
thing.
of belonging is important anyway. But I did hear from my own experience, I did hear a lot of founders, male and female, but also senior managers say, yeah, I've grown with the team, but sometimes I feel sort of lonely. And usually they would say something along the lines of like, I'm so working on such a high level that it's difficult to cross that bridge for other people, or that I think it's difficult.
Yeah, I think, well, for me personally, I always look for a way to make my job fun.
Yeah.
And I really like the content. So I just look for an excuse every now and then to just go really deep.
Yeah.
And well, then I can connect.
Yeah.
Because then we're on the same level. But there are less and less opportunities for me to do that. And that's also part of my job. So I'm also growing into that and getting used to that. And it's more and more okay.
Yeah. But do you want to go that direction, or do you still want to stay bit connections on? Okay.
No, I want to be CEO.
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah. True. Okay. Sorry, forgot that. A question I still had is, what you did is pretty entrepreneurial to build something from scratch, to get it funded, to get it approved twice. How does Rabo support that entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, I think Rabobank does that in many different ways. I think in general, Rabobank is really good at listening, which I find really important. So really appreciate that. But also Rabobank strives to work according to Simplify at Scale. And Simplify at Scale is our own tailored version of Working Agile. And I expect many people are familiar with Working Agile. Working Agile facilitates entrepreneurship in many different ways. For example, in bringing ownership and mandate as much as possible to the teams, the people in the teams.
So in really case, down below where the work needs to happen.
Exactly. And it also encourages innovation and rapid prototyping through iterative development. And it also focuses a lot on quickly adapting to changing customer needs. And those things are all, I think, very important in order to feel room to be entrepreneurial. And specifically for our team, I'm really proud that we also really built on those values and embraced that way of working.
How did you, can you give a couple of specific examples of how you approach difficult things that you ran into? Were there any major difficulties in the development stage where you were like, oh, now we have to really go back to the drawing board and see if we've done anything wrong?
Well, I think one of the things that we did really well is that we were always thinking ahead a lot. So we were very conscious with every decision we made, every development we made, about what will the future hold, what kind of expectations.
How did you do that? Did you go to conferences, talk to lawyers, people in Brussels?
No, we didn't. No, it was just based on, I think, partly common sense and partly talking to consultants, talking to the business. That was part of it, and they then talk to.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So they got the information to you.
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Cool. Going back to building a team, that also involves building a culture, especially also taking ownership. Is there a difference between your team culture and that of Rabobank, by the way,
Ooh, that's a
on
dangerous
details?
question. I think there's a lot of similarities, but there's also differences. Well, I think I would say the biggest difference is that one of the core building blocks of our culture is excellence. We're really, really proud of that. And by definition, we can't be exceptional in the entire bank. Right?
No.
So we really strive for being exceptional.
So this is the part where you really want to shine.
Yes.
Did you
Yes.
decide that up front? Like this is.
That's a good question. Actually, I think I didn't really realize when I started that culture was this important. But I did realize what I found important in general. So I knew which kind of people I enjoyed working with. I knew what my core values were. And I think I accidentally started building our culture based on that.
Okay.
So it starts with hiring the first people. And I was looking for people who were exceptionally smart, who were exceptionally motivated to deliver not just what was asked, but go much further. And I was looking for people that I could really connect with. And in hindsight, I can link that back to the pillars of our culture, which are excellence, ownership, and openness. And I'm really proud that we managed to create a place where those things are at the center. And that makes it really not just a place that you really want to work, but also a place that you really want to be. Yeah.
So again, that sense of belonging comes back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do you build diversity into that?
Can I say one more thing before we go to diversity? What I also really like is that we started referring to ourselves as a startup within the bank, and later a scale up, of course, because it was pretty large.
If you grow.
Yeah. And that was also something that we were proud of, and that we started talking about, that we were proud of that atmosphere where everybody was so motivated, everybody was taking ownership, we were really getting things done, despite the fact that we were part of this complex environment. So it was also really something that was bonding us and helped us grow. Sorry, diversity.
Okay, diversity. How do you build diversity into a team and into a culture that people actually? Because if you have a sense of belonging as one of your core values, it also requires, if you have different people there, they all need to belong. How do you create a place like that?
Yeah, I think openness and respect. That's
What does openness in this case mean?
Well, I think that when you're talking about diversity, then what you mean is you want to have, or at least what I would mean is that you want to have many different perspectives at the table that also trigger each other. Yeah. And that requires that everybody is open about what they think.
How do you facilitate these discussions? Because you like heated discussions to a certain extent, but not everyone does.
No, that's true. And I think that's also something that you need to be conscious about.
Yeah.
So for some people, if you want their opinions, you need to get it in another way, in another setting. And we also really talk about that with the team. What are ways that we can get their opinions? We also have Scrum Masters, of course. They really help us to think about how do we get the opinions of the team. But I think what's also part of it is, in our specific situation, we also need many different disciplines. So data science, IT, architecture, anti-money laundering, laws and regulations, so many different people that we need, that by definition, nobody has the full perspective. So nobody can start doing something on their own. You all need each other. So listening.
You build a sort of dependency if I hear you correctly, that ensures that people have to listen to get the job done.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
But it wasn't that I created that on purpose. It's just that it's there and you use it, right?
Yeah.
And you keep talking about it, and you make that point to stress that people need to listen to each other, but not just across disciplines, right? Also within disciplines, you need the different perspectives.
Yeah, I fully agree. Because you're building a lot of stuff that also uses AI. So artificial intelligence, I suppose. How do you keep that rule set sane in terms of ethics? Because we for those of you who are not Dutch, we just had a pretty big scandal in the government where with fraud detection, this is why I point on it, they built in triggers that were designed in such a way that only foreign people would be picked out, and I dare say only women who are with a non-Western background were picked out as possible offenders. So how do you, within a banking setting, especially with money laundering and a combination of money laundering and AI, how do you keep that safe and sane?
Yeah, there's a lot of attention for that in the bank. So we have a lot of frameworks that you need to adhere to, a lot of different moments in the process where it is checked.
Mhm.
So I would say we're really doing everything we can to make sure that this doesn't
Is that
happen.
built into the process, like by design also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Built into the processes. Yes.
So you also thought of that up front?
Yes.
Like, okay,
Yes.
this could possibly happen, and then okay.
Yeah, you have to. You're forced to think about that
Yeah.
up front. Yeah.
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 So we don't run the risk at Rabo that we're inadvertently, because we have the wrong characteristics, flagged as
Well,
because that's always my fear for the banking sector, that they use AI in a way that is the intention is good,
mhm.
because I think never no one wants terrorist attacks, but that we sort of overdo it.
That's a different point, I think.
Huh?
Overdoing it is also definitely a risk.
Huh?
But just talking about ethics, I think, we're really doing everything that we can, and I think the risks are very limited because of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when would we be overdoing this?
Oh, I think overdoing, I meant more with all the attention we have on money laundering in general,
Uh-huh.
that, we're trying to do everything we can.
Yeah.
But we also need to do it in a way that actually helps us find those criminals, right?
Yeah.
That we're not just ticking the box, we're really catching them.
Okay, yeah.
More,
And that,
more about that.
I want to wrap up a bit. 2 questions left. One is, who are your role models?
I have many different role models, and at the same time, I have none.
Yeah, because you used to have Zorro. And,
yes, exactly. Yes, but I don't have one person who embodies everything that I would like to be, but there are many different persons who trigger some kind of inspiration in me. So, for example, I'm inspired by young women who make it far, who are leading with empathy. For example, Jacinda Ardern and Sanna Marin are examples of that. But yeah, they're pretty far away from me. I also get inspired by people much closer to me. So, for example, the people in my teams who are so motivated to continuously improve, I really get inspired by that. But also a lot of friends inspire me. For example, because they know themselves really well, or because they make decisions without letting themselves be restricted by the expectations of others, which was exactly my problem before, right? And what also really can inspire me is TV characters. Harvey Specter is my favorite one.
Okay.
And I think, he just has so many characteristics that I would love to have.
Has it shifted, by the way, from only men to more, because you mentioned the New Zealand Prime Minister? Is it predominantly female now, or?
Well, yeah, I think it has shifted, but it's not only women.
No.
And I think that's also what I hope to achieve, that we all appreciate the quality irrespective of the gender. So I think what is nice if your role models are also a diverse group, can be, women and men.
I fully agree. Hey, as I said before, I'm on a mission to make DEI obsolete by the end of 2032, not in the way that Elon Musk wants to do it, but in a way that it's a normal thing of life. What would be your expert advice to get there?
Yes, well, that's not really an easy thing to do, I think. So I also don't have the holy grail for that. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is maybe you could help people to hire others with complementary characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I realized myself when building a team is that it's so much easier to hire people who are copies of yourself than to hire somebody who brings something new.
Yeah.
And yeah, my personal experience is also that I learned by far the most from those people who were less like me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be beneficial for everybody if all of us would get better at hiring people who are less like ourselves.
Okay. And less like ourselves can be either gender or neurodivergent.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be gender.
So your advice would then be to start a recruitment company?
Not to start talking about that.
To start talking about
Yeah.
it on the podcast. Well, I will for sure talk about that on the podcast in future episodes. For now, thank you very much, Lieke. Really appreciate it. If people want to connect with you, of course, here you will be in the hallway afterwards to connect with. But if people are listening to this episode, where would you like to send them?
Well, of course, they can always connect on LinkedIn, but I would also like to send them to rabobank.jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That's where we have all our vacancies, but also what it's like working at Rabobank and stories of our employees. So also including from myself. So we tell more about ourselves and what it's for us like to work at Rabobank. And can I also say something specific for my team? Well, for my team, we would really love to attract more female talent with a specialist ambition, because we have great diversity. We have exactly 50-50 in terms of gender in leadership roles. But what we do see is that women typically have more managerial ambitions and grow into managerial roles.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I would also love to have that diversity in the content specialist roles.
Yeah.
And well, it's not that we don't have them. We definitely do have women in those roles, but more senior data scientists, more senior developers, as in female ones, would be really, really nice.
Good.
But I would like to end with, we're always looking for great talents, right? So irrespective of your gender, irrespective of your ambition, if you're great at what you do and if you match with our culture, then nothing else matters.
Okay. Sounds like a great place to wrap. Lieke Hölscher, thank you very much for this wonderful episode. I don't know if there are any questions for Lieke or for myself. I see one candidate. This is your call to action. Just wait for the mic.
My voice is already quite loud. For Dear Kjan, I have a question about if there were specific gaps in the mindset or conversations you were having with men in the tech industry that you felt compelled to address by starting this podcast. That's the first question. And the second question is, it seems like in some circles, men addressing female problems can be taken a bit skeptically, or can fall into the mansplaining area. So how do you avoid something like that?
Well, to avoid it is pretty difficult, because it's my experience is that people will talk about you and around your back anyway. So as one of actually the guests that I'm of who the episode is going live on Friday actually said, if you just put your head down and work hard and be empathetic and understanding in your communications, don't bother about the rest. It's also a bit a point I wanted to make about the previous panel discussion. there were a few female founders here. If you ever ambition it and you get the sense that it's too much male dominated or not really your crew, you don't have a click, this is not the investor for you. Just and I think the lady who had her this gut consultancy is not with us. No, she left. Anyway, but listen, in that case, just listen to your intuition. It's really important to do that. Back to your first question. What can you repeat it?
Was there anything specific in your conversations with other men that made you feel like it's necessary to have such a podcast? Like,
yeah. That they didn't.
What were they?
Well, basically denying that there's a problem. So I talked to a few investors about the 2%, and they were, yeah, but there's like very few women, female founders. And if you look into the data, yes, there are less female founders than there are male founders. That is all true. But if you look at the early stage investors, women tend to get like half of what the men get in terms of financing. And that's plain wrong. That's plain discrimination in my ballpark. And sure, there's all kinds of reasons around it, but still, if you look at the facts, I just couldn't defend it anymore. So that was one of the reasons for me to start the podcast. Also, as in hindsight, also as a bit of a journalism, so research thing, and the podcast is a way to document my own journey in getting to grips with all the male biases, but also female biases. So
much better. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. Hi.
Hi.
Good to see you. Thank you. This was such a great talk.
Yeah.
Lieke, I'm curious about a few things. You guys were talking a lot about the composition of your team, and essentially how you have worked really hard to bring in different perspectives. I am very curious about, from a transaction monitoring perspective, from a product perspective, from an efficacy perspective, why does that matter? Why does having different perspectives matter when you're developing such a transactionally driven product?
I think actually it matters. It always matters, right? With any complex problem, I would say it matters to have these different perspectives to get to the best possible solution. But then maybe the question is, why is it so complex? Isn't it very straightforward? And I actually think it is very, very complex. There's multiple angles that make it complex. A part of it is that you really want to catch as many criminals as possible. But by trying to catch the criminals, you can't avoid also talking to customers who aren't doing anything wrong, and you want to limit that as much as possible. So that balance, it's never a yes or no. It's always a gray area, and it's really hard to find the best balance in that. So that makes it difficult. Then you have the ethics part, of course, but also simply the way that, well, we need to process billions of transactions. So also the technical solutions in order to do that in the right way, that's also really, really difficult. So also the technical solutions behind that require a lot of different ways of thinking.
Can I ask you a follow-on on that?
Yes.
Can you tell me maybe of 1 or 2 examples of when that has specifically mattered, and how have you measured that?
Sorry, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. When you say when that specifically happened, you mean a problem where it mattered that we had different perspectives?
You got it. Exactly
Okay.
that.
Okay. So there's many examples. Now I need to choose one. I think recently there was the question of how we could best organize our area, because it's a really large area, and I grew from one side into it. But with the decision to have one system as a global solution, we also needed to think about, okay, how are we going to organize ourselves? And from my perspective, I had an idea of, okay, how can I steer this group the best? But so with my management team, we came up with an idea, well, and we proposed it to the entire group, right? Because we thought this might be the best way. But then we also asked the group, what do you think? What should we change about it? And there came a lot of different suggestions to make it a lot better. Things that I never would have thought about just because of the perspective I was looking at the problem with.
Like?
And for example, for one specific team, it was really important to be close to certain other teams because not because they needed the same type of capabilities, but because they needed the same type of stakeholder interaction. But it wasn't even with the same stakeholders. But they said, that's an important problem that we have. And I wouldn't think of that. But yeah, that's then something that comes from the group.
Okay. Wisdom of the crowd.
Sorry?
Wisdom of the crowd.
Yeah, definitely. Does it answer your question?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Hi, Lieke, and
Hi.
thanks for sharing your story. It was super inspiring to me. You mentioned that your solution or the solution that you've built together with your team has global potential. And my question is, would you consider a spin-off of Rabo? And yes, no, and why?
Yes. Well, the answer is yes.
Then you can be the CEO straight away, right?
That's true. That's true. No, yeah. I thought about that many times because I think what we did is so good. I think, everybody would want to use it. But it's also at the same time really, really far away. It's definitely not my next step. And it's also not because I really want it. It's just because, I think it's a good product and I would like anybody to be able to use it. So
does it have customer potential, by the way? So like more B2C, so business to really ordinary individuals, like in apps?
No, I wouldn't see that specific application. The only thing I can imagine that you would do is give it to other banks, so they could use the same system.
Payment providers like Mollie.
Yes, those as well. Yes, I think for now it's not on the table. It's not something we discuss. But what I do tell the team is always what I'm thinking, right? And the next step that I already see is I want to take over more. I want to do more for Rabobank. And I think the first step is doing more for Rabobank, because I think there's many use cases where you want to have a system that's able to process these transactions. So I think there's more, and the next step would be great to go beyond, but it's not a short-term thing.